Rome. The name still echoes across history as a symbol of civilization, law, and glory. But behind the marble arches and glittering triumphs lies another Rome, a Rome that perfected brutality, industrialized conquest, and turned extermination into a political weapon. This is not the Rome of your school textbooks. Today, we will uncover the darkest truth about the Roman Empire, its systematic campaigns of mass murder, cultural annihilation, and terror. These are not accidents of war, they were deliberate policies, celebrated, recorded, and justified by Roman law. By the time you finish this story, you will never look at Rome the same way again. Part 1. Carthage must be destroyed. We begin in 146 BC. Carthage, once the great rival of Rome, has already been stripped of its navy, disarmed, and forced to pay crushing tribute. It poses no threat, yet the Roman Senate demands its destruction. For years, Senator Cato the Elder ended every speech with the same chilling words: Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. Not defeated, not subdued, destroyed. When the siege finally came, it lasted 3 years. Imagine 500,000 civilians trapped behind walls. Starvation spreads, disease claims thousands. The streets are choked with corpses. This was not an accident of war, it was a calculated plan. When Roman troops finally broke through, Scipio Aemilianus gave explicit orders. No one was to be spared, except those reserved for slavery. What followed was 6 days of organized slaughter. Families were dragged into the streets and butchered. Children were cut down before their parents. Entire neighborhoods were cleared, block by block, with the precision of a military drill. Historians describe the stench of blood and rotting bodies so overwhelming that soldiers had to cover their faces. 400,000 people died in those 6 days. And still, Rome was not finished. For 11 more days, engineers demolished every building, every temple, every library. Works of art were smashed, manuscripts burned, and sacred sites cursed so that no Carthaginian identity could ever rise again. 50,000 survivors were sold into slavery, stripped of all rights, and condemned to fates often worse than death. The destruction of Carthage was not just conquest, it was cultural extermination. Part 2. The Fall of Corinth. In the same year, 146 BC, Rome turned eastward. Corinth, jewel of Greece, stood as the last proud defender of Greek independence. Wealthy, artistic, and defiant, Corinth represented everything Rome feared: a rival culture. Rome destroyed it with ruthless efficiency. Every man was executed. Women and children were enslaved, many subjected to systematic abuse before being sold across the empire. Families were torn apart by design, ensuring that Greek cultural identity could not survive. The city's treasures were looted and shipped to Rome. Priceless statues were broken for sport. Libraries were burned, philosophy erased in bonfires that lit the night sky. Temples were cursed, streets leveled, and Corinth was reduced to dust. The destruction of Carthage and Corinth in the same year was not coincidence. It was a demonstration. Rome was announcing to the world, resist, and you will not just be conquered, you will cease to exist. Part 3. Caesar in Gaul. If Carthage and Corinth revealed Rome's brutality, Julius Caesar perfected it. Between 58 and 50 BC, he led campaigns in Gaul that killed over 1 million people and another 1 million enslaved. These are not accusations from enemies. Caesar bragged about it in his own writings. The Helvetii tribe, some 368,000 strong, tried to migrate peacefully. Caesar hunted them down. By the end, only 110,000 survived, enslaved and broken. The Eburones tribe resisted Roman occupation. Caesar declared their entire tribe must be exterminated. For months, his legions hunted men, women, and children like animals. Villages were burned, survivors executed or sold. Roman records describe the campaign as extirpation, the deliberate removal of a people from history. The siege of Evaricum in 52 BC stands as one of the clearest windows into Rome's cruelty. 40,000 civilians were trapped inside. They begged to surrender. Caesar refused. He wanted an example. When the city fell, Roman soldiers methodically slaughtered almost every inhabitant, men, women, children, the elderly. Out of 40,000, only 800 survived, kept alive to spread the terror to neighboring tribes. This was not just war. It was psychological warfare designed to shatter resistance forever. Part 4. Cultural genocide. Caesar's campaigns did not stop at mass killings. They targeted the very fabric of Gallic culture. Druids, the spiritual leaders and keepers of oral tradition, were systematically hunted down and executed. Sacred groves were cut and burned, temples destroyed, communities stripped of identity. Entire generations were enslaved, families separated to erase Maori, children forced to grow up as Romans, their heritage erased by design. Caesar turned extermination into a political weapon. Every massacre he orchestrated won him prestige in Rome. Every triumphal parade was a celebration, not of victory, but of annihilation. Part 5. The destruction of Jerusalem. In 70 AD, Rome repeated its strategy in Judea. After a brutal revolt, the legions of Titus surrounded Jerusalem. Starvation consumed the city. Parents were forced to watch their children waste away. Disease spread unchecked. When the walls were breached, systematic killing began. Tens of thousands were butchered. Survivors were paraded in chains through Rome. The great temple, heart of Jewish faith, was burned to the ground. Rome was not simply suppressing rebellion. It was erasing cultural and religious identity. For Jews, this was a catastrophe so great that its scars remain visible to this day. Part 6. The Dacian campaigns. Trajan's conquest of Dacia in the early 2nd century AD brought Rome wealth in gold, but also another blood-soaked campaign. Roman reliefs, carved in stone on Trajan's column, openly displayed decapitations, crucifixions, and mass suicides driven by despair. Tens of thousands of Dacians were slaughtered. Survivors were deported or enslaved, their culture systematically dismantled. Roman propaganda turned this extermination into art, glorified on monuments tourists still marvel at today. Part 7. Systematic slave raids. Rome's atrocities were not limited to great wars. Across the empire, legions routinely raided border regions, capturing entire communities. Survivors were enslaved, families torn apart, cultures dissolved into Rome's insatiable markets. Slavery was not a byproduct of war. It was the fuel of Rome's economy. Each triumph was measured not only in territory, but in human lives reduced to property. Conclusion. For centuries, Rome has been remembered as a beacon of law, order, and civilization. But hidden beneath the marble lies a darker truth. Rome was also one of the greatest machines of systematic extermination in human history. From Carthage to Corinth, Gaul to Judea, Dacia to the countless nameless villages consumed in slave raids, Rome perfected a policy of calculated annihilation. Its atrocities were celebrated, legalized, and immortalized in stone. So the next time you walk past a Roman monument or admire a Roman road, remember those stones were laid not just with genius, but with blood. Because Rome was not merely a civilization, it was an empire of extermination.